not going to undermine the secretary or give away what we intend to do. That's Obama. That's not President Trump.
Dr. Gore, fair enough. What do you see as how would you like to move the ball down the field, we should say, then, as it pertains to Syria and what Russia can do to be a part of the solution as opposed to just backing this dictator?
Right. So the American people need to understand that President Trump is an alloying of two things. He's a great patriot. He loves his country. But also, look at his business career. He's an amazing pragmatist. He knows where he has to get, and that's why he is the master of the deal. As a result, this administration, his White House, looks at the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. That's the last 8 years where you created fantasies about how the world should be and what is achievable. And as such, as pragmatists, we look at Syria and realize it isn't just a question of the Assad regime, of hundreds of thousands of civilians being killed. It's also a geopolitical puzzle. It involves other nations. Remember, this is a regime that has been sponsored by Iran, the biggest state sponsor of terrorism for decades. It's backed by China. It's backed by Russia. As a result, we have to deal with those parts of the puzzle before we come to a resolution. The point of our action this week is that diplomacy without force backing it up is just words. And that's why we took the action we took with regards to the airfield, and now we have to deal with the other players that are involved and ask them, it's time to resolve this. Are you prepared to work with America?
Doctor, how do you lead this country and also not be the police of the world? How do you find that right balance, right? Because now you're looking at a regime change. What do you do with Syria? How do you get that right?
Okay, so again, it's the combination of two things. You look at national security interests. It is in the national security interests of the United States to deal with the threat of chemical weapons used against civilians when it's happening in a war zone where our primary threat, ISIS, is running around the battlefield. So the first thing is you measure what the impact is to national security. And again, strategy is like politics. It's the art of the possible. And you don't make the perfect, you don't make the good the enemy of the perfect. So we change, we assist where possible. And when something as egregious as the use of chemical weapons against women and children occurs, we will take action.
So you have, I mean, you've been a staunch voice against ISIS here on this program for many, many years. So as you mentioned, ISIS in that breath there on the battlefield there in Syria. So on the one hand, you have ISIS. You could create this vacuum where ISIS could run rampant. If you do have a regime removed and that open space for ISIS to flourish, what is the discussions happening inside the White House? This is an absolute conundrum.
Well, yeah, but we've got an incredible team. Just look at the people, look at the secretaries, look at the principals. We've got 4-star generals, we've got civilians. Look, we've got Rex Tillerson, an incredible manager, CEO, a man who's done geopolitics in the private sector for decades. So, you know, we have the capacity and we have the leadership in President Trump. But the question of how we're going to do this, we're going to get everybody to understand that the way things are cannot remain. The idea that 500,000 people, women and children, are going to be killed while America just sits on the sidelines, as was the case during the Obama administration. The idea that Susan Rice with the Russians, think about this, this is your Russia story, that Susan Rice and the Russians guaranteed us 3 years ago there are no chemical weapons.
Right.
That kind of behavior is going to end.
Yeah, it also makes you concerned, though, about Iran and the Iran deal and what they have in terms of weapons and nukes, right? When you see the chemical weapons in Syria and how that wasn't totally accurate, it makes you think about Iran.
Well, yes, and I think it's an incredibly positive sign just how quiet the mullahs have been since Thursday. That tells you that they're drawing conclusions, they're not shooting from the hip anymore. The people who have a lot of responsibility with regards to the carnage in the Middle East understand there is a new president, and that new president isn't going to lead from behind, which is an oxymoron. President Trump is going to lead from the front of the pack, and I think various nations now understand that.
Very much so. And Dr. Gorka, one of the unintended consequences of what's happened in Syria over the last couple of days, it's blowing away the narrative that there's collusion between Russia and President Trump. But when you look at Vladimir Putin, when you look at the Russians, who have a lot of boots on the ground and interest in Syria, do you see them, do you believe they could be part of the solution, or are they permanently going to be part of the problem there?
That's up for them to decide, but I think they finally realized how very, very different this president is, and I hope they come to the correct conclusion that, you know, we are not going to allow things like this to occur. As the president said, let's listen to the boss's own expression of the future. In the last press conference he gave in Trump Tower, somebody asked him, what about Moscow, what about relations with Putin? And he said, look, we would like to have good relations with Moscow. Right now, it doesn't seem possible. If that is the case, so be it. He's a pragmatist. We'd like them to be part of the solution. Let's give that a shot. Let's see what Secretary Tillerson is able to achieve.
Yeah, big week ahead. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, always appreciate your insights. Thanks for being with us.